An empire crossed 10,000 light-years to kill humanity's fleet in a single dawn, with machines that needed no one to fly them and no one to feel a thing. The greatest surprise strike in history, and the worst mistake they would ever make. For 10,000 years, the region had lived up to its name, nowhere more than here. They called that whole quiet arm of the galaxy the Long Calm. Out past the settled worlds and the buoy lines, the stars thinned and the dark went patient. 10,000 years, and it had never once given anything back. At the edge of that quiet, the ardent Union kept its great fleet base at Halcyon. A blue-green world turning under a mild sun, and the ships of the Wall come home to rest. Sub-Lieutenant Ione Vance had the second morning watch aboard the destroyer Steadfast, and she was thinking about coffee, which tells you exactly how the morning was going. Quiet. The way every morning out here went. It was easier than thinking about the letter in her breast pocket. 3 lines from her brother. He'd made gunnery officer aboard the Concordance. 30,000 tons of her, Dario had written, and I get to say fire. Come see the guns before the fleet stands down. She kept meaning to answer it. There was always time. She hadn't brought the good coffee. There'd been every chance to. That was the part she would keep afterward. All those quiet mornings, and nobody had spent them on anything. From the Steadfast's bridge, the anchorage spread out below her, and in the first light it was something to see. 100 warships and more, riding at anchor around the great lit ring of Halcyon. Grey hulls, cold engines, quiet. The great ships of the Wall sat at the center like sleeping animals. Cruisers ringed them. The small ships, the destroyers and tugs and fuelers, threaded between them like minnows around whales. Dawn came up the way it always did. Slow and gold and sure of itself. The rating on the sensor board was a boy named Ellis. Not yet 18, ears too big for his head, still saying "Mom" like the word might break. Right now his voice was climbing somewhere it had no business going. "Mom. Mom, I have a contact." Buoy glitch, Ione told herself, already crossing the deck. Ghost return, a hull fall drifting off the lane. Anything but that. Then she saw his screen. The dark at the far edge of the scope, where nothing was ever supposed to be, wasn't dark anymore. A smear of red, resolving as she watched. It became points, and the points multiplied. 1 became 12, 100. A number the board gave up counting and shaded solid. That's not a contact, she thought. That's a wall of red across the outer marker coming on. Run the diagnostic, she said, because the alternative was saying the true thing out loud. "It's clean, Mom." Ellis's hands were shaking on the console. "They're under power. They're accelerating." He looked up at her, a kid, somebody's kid, and said it plain. "They're coming here. 10,000 years, and nothing had ever come out of that dark." So when it finally opened, the people looking straight at it didn't believe their own eyes. Ione believed it. She just wished she didn't. "Sound general quarters." Her voice held. She'd have time to be surprised about that later, if there was a later. Signal the flag, signal the net, contact bearing the outer marker, hostile, closing. She made herself say the number, thousands. The klaxon went up over the Steadfast, and then out across the anchorage, one ship and then another, until the whole fleet was awake and screaming. And it was already too late. She'd done everything right, fast as anyone alive could have, and it hadn't mattered, because the enemy hadn't crossed 10,000 light-years to arrive when the alarm did. They'd timed it to arrive after. Out past the marker, the Vharen Imperium watched the thing it had bet everything on come true. Everything they had was riding on this one morning. Every tender the Imperium owned, and it owned more than anyone in the calm had guessed, had crossed the emptiness dark and silent. Drives cold, running on momentum and nerve for longer than most navies thought a hull could take, and there were no pilots. That was the secret the Imperium had kept longest, and spent everything on. The killers in the tenders' bellies needed no one aboard. No crew to train, or feed, or grieve. Just one cold idea poured into them by the thousand. That a war could be won in a single afternoon if you picked the day well and hit hard enough against an enemy who didn't yet know he was in one. The bays opened and the swarm poured out. Not one wave, but 100, staggered and precise. Heavy torpedo drones, low and slow. Above them the killers, crimson and black, engines burning the dull red of a banked fire, thousands of them, and not a living soul in any of them. They'd studied the target for weeks, the sleeping fleet laid out in every briefing, but there was no one riding the last of the dive now, no one to feel the thing a person might have felt, looking down at all those undefended ships. Pity is a human thing, and the Imperium had taken the human out. The machines fell on Halcyon without hurry and without mercy, because they'd been built with neither. The torpedoes hit before the alarms finished sounding. Ione felt the first one before she saw it, a deep thud that came up through her boots and the roots of her teeth. She turned to the viewport in time for the second, and the third, and to understand she was not going to be able to count them. The wall ship Vigil died first. Torpedo drones came in across her bow so low they seemed to graze the hull, and behind each one a long silver line reached out and touched her along the flank. Once, twice, 6 times. 30,000 tons of sleeping animal, and the Vigil came apart where she lay. A seam of white fire ran her length, her spine folded, and the dark poured in through the wound. Where the Vigil had been, a slow flower of flame and debris bloomed open, and small tumbling shapes went with it that Ione made herself not look at. She knew what they were. There was nothing she could do, and the day had barely started. Guns, she heard herself say, point defense, anything. Her captain came onto the bridge at a run, took one look at the anchorage, and aged 10 years in a breath. Then he caught hold of himself, because that was the job, and the Steadfast started to fight. They cut the clamps and brought the engines up hot and hard, past every limit, because the limits didn't mean anything now. They put the little ship's nose into the incoming and threw up every gun they had. The anchorage that had been still and gold 5 minutes ago was a furnace now. All light and noise and tearing metal. The end of the world, right on schedule. A drone came straight down their throat. Ione watched the muzzle flare walk a line of fire toward the ship, toward her, the thing that was about to kill her. And God help her, it was beautiful. The point defense caught it. A stitch of tracer went up, and the drone came apart 20 meters off the bow, close enough that she saw there was no one inside it. No one at all. Just a machine, finished with one task, already reaching for the next. There were 40 more behind it. Catastrophe has one mercy. It is too big to feel all at once. Ione didn't live the death of Halcyon as a single thing. Nobody who was there did. She lived it as an hour of small things, each one whole and unbearable, and gone before the next arrived. Ellis taking a splinter of hull through the throat and going down without a sound, 3 steps away, and nothing she could do about it. The oiler Almace rolling over slow and dignified with her whole crew still aboard. An escape pod of Vigil survivors, 30 men who had lived through the impossible, caught in the open by a strafing run and gone. Her captain's voice, hoarse now but level, giving orders, holding the ship together with nothing but the sound of it. And under all of it, across the burning anchorage, the one shape she couldn't stop finding. The Concordance, her brother's ship. The wall ship where Dario got to say fire. And the Concordance fought. Of the whole wall, caught sleeping, she woke fastest and hit back hardest. For a few impossible minutes, the old ship stood in the middle of the fire and threw it back in every direction, and the crimson wave broke on her and couldn't get in. Somewhere down in that grey hull, in a gun position, her brother was saying the word he had been so proud to earn. Fire, fire, fire. Then the heavy drones came for the Concordance the way they had come for the Vigil, and Ione understood there had never been any saving her. The enemy was working through the anchorage the way a machine works down a list. And it had reached her brother. She made herself watch, because he shouldn't die with no one who loved him looking. She stood with her hands flat on the cold glass while the silver line struck the Concordance along her flank, while the fire took her, and she did not look away. The Concordance went down fighting. It made the record that way. It was true. And it was worth nothing at all to the sister 3,000 meters off, with her hands on the glass. By the time the Vharen recall sounded and the crimson tide drew back into the dark, as cleanly as it had come, Halcyon anchorage was gone. Not damaged, gone. The wall of the Ardent Union, the great crude ships, the ones meant to decide any war the Union ever fought, lay broken and burning across 100 cubic kilometers of ruined space. The station's ring guttered and went dark in patches, like a string of lights failing one bulb at a time. The mild sun still shone on all of it. The blue-green world went on turning, and the debris of the dead fleet drifted out in slow rivers the light came through. Aboard the Steadfast, which had somehow come through it, Ione Vance kept her watch to the end. Her captain came and stood beside her. For a long while, neither of them said anything. "They'll be back," he said at last. "You know that. This doesn't finish a war. It starts one. They crossed 10,000 light-years to do this in an afternoon, and they'll think it was plenty. It never is. That's the one thing they've got wrong." Ione didn't answer. She was watching the far edge of the anchorage where the debris thinned and three shapes were coming in, slow and dark against the ruin. Tenders. The Union's tenders had been out that morning. Such a small thing, a matter of scheduling. They'd been running drills past the buoy line, and the swarm had found their berths empty and gone for the wall instead. Because to the Vharen, the wall was the fleet. It always had been. The tenders came home to a graveyard. Ione watched them thread in past the broken hulls and the dead ring and the drifting rivers of debris, and she understood, before the admirals did, before the histories did, exactly what she was looking at. The war the Vharen Imperium had just lost. They didn't know it yet. They would spend 3 years not knowing. But somewhere in all those quiet decades, while the wall was king and everyone agreed it was, the thing that decided wars had quietly changed. Ione Vance took the letter out of her pocket. She didn't open it. She already knew what it said. Across the wrecked anchorage, the first tender cleared the last of the drifting debris and put her scorched bow toward the open dark. Her engines came up blue and cold and steady, and she did not slow down. The calm was over. It had never been peace, whatever they had told themselves, only the space between tides.